Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back.
College football playoff rankings, week number 4. Probably a lot of pissed off people there in South Bend, Indiana.
Yep.
We'll talk about our thoughts here on the top 10. We got Clemson at number 1 and Alabama at number 2. Really no surprise there. Anybody that thought either of those two teams was going to lose their spot is fool. Oklahoma at number 3. We'll talk about them in a second. That's the biggest surprise, I think. Well, for the people that aren't the experts, that's probably the biggest surprise.
And we like to think we are experts.
Yeah, we like to.
But,
we've been proven wrong before, but we'll talk about Oklahoma in a second. Iowa at number 4. We thought they'd be there. They snuck in to the top 4
I
finally.
even thought they might be at number 3, but
Yeah, and with an unranked or with a unbeaten Iowa in the top 4 right now, it's going to be hard to get them out of the top 4 unless they lose one of their next 2 games.
yeah, if they win their next 2 games, then they should be in for sure.
Yep. And then you got Michigan State at number 5. They jumped 4 spots. To me, a little bit of a surprise because they beat Ohio State, who's really struggled all year. They haven't had a lot of big wins, but they're undefeated champs, and they were undefeated.
And it was at Ohio State. I know it was only a 3-point win, but
Yeah.
I was kind of surprised that they jumped that high. I know people had them maybe 3 with Oklahoma at 4, which I didn't think was right
Yeah.
or would happen, but they jumped 4 spots. That's a pretty big move.
Yeah, that's pretty big with bumping Notre Dame to number 6. Now, that was a big surprise, but I kind of understand when they were talking about the reasons why they're at number 6. I kind of get it because they had not the best showing against Wake Forest.
Yeah, the last 2 weeks have
They
been...
struggled this last week against Boston College. It was 19-16, and really the entire game was a struggle. Another game in the rain, bad weather. It just seems like Notre Dame struggles in bad weather.
Yeah.
But it's one of those games where they had to win big, and we talked about it a couple weeks ago. They have to win their next 2 games big, even though Boston College is not a threat. We didn't think they ended up being a tougher opponent than I think Notre Dame thought as well.
Yeah, and that was, with Michigan State jumping that many spots, whether, they win this weekend and, go to the Big Ten Championship and play Iowa, if Iowa wins against Nebraska and Michigan State wins and they're sitting at 4-5 or 3-4 or somewhere right in there, the winner of that game is going to be in the playoff. That jump over Notre Dame was actually kind of big to the point where if they keep winning, they're not going to drop below them. Or shouldn't.
Yeah, and it screws over Notre Dame because Notre Dame, their next game is Stanford, and then basically they have to hope that crap happens ahead of them.
Well, and that they win.
Yeah, well, they got to beat Stanford.
And one other thing, then they would want Stanford to probably win the Pac-12 championship.
Yeah.
Not that that's going to bump somebody ahead of them, but it'll boost them a
boost
little bit.
schedule.
I did hear somebody talking today that they probably need to have a pretty significant win over Stanford.
Well, and here's the thing: Notre Dame beat Stanford. That's their 3rd win against top 25 team this season. That's good for a resume, good enough at least. But apparently, I just don't know what the committee's going to look at that point in the season, with them being at number 6 right now, because they already bumped them back behind a couple other teams. But what we do know is there's some good games coming up this weekend. So we'll get to the upcoming schedules here in a second. Baylor at number 7. I don't even think they moved. I think they were 7 or 8 last week.
Then, yeah, I can't remember.
So Ohio State gets bumped to number 8 after losing to Michigan State. Number 9, you got Stanford. Number 10, Michigan. So
Actually, I think Baylor did make a couple, because they had lost the week
I think
before.
they were 8.
They lost the week before.
They dropped to 8, I believe.
Okay.
6 to 8 or something like that. They didn't drop far because they lost to Oklahoma. So let's talk about Oklahoma real quick. Really no surprises with us on the top 10 as far, for the most part.
Teams that are in it,
Except
not
for
necessarily
Oklahoma.
where they're at.
So Oklahoma's a little bit of a shock. Oh, by the way, we love that Florida dropped to 12 because we said they were going to.
Florida did drop
And
to
we
12.
predicted that, and Oklahoma State's right at number 11, but Florida deserved to drop 2 spots after that terrible game against Florida Atlantic. But
Was it 2 spots or was it 4 spots?
they dropped 4 spots.
Yeah.
Sorry, they dropped 4
That's what I
spots. But kind of funny because Oklahoma beat a TCU. Here,
By
we're going to
one.
talk about Oklahoma now. They beat a TCU team with no Dotson and with no Boykin, and they beat them by 1 when all TCU had to do was kick an extra point to win the game.
Kick an
And they
extra point
went
to go to overtime.
To go to overtime, and they went for 2 instead. How is that a big win for Oklahoma against a TCU team who has struggled against Kansas without Boykin and now struggled in this game, but still almost won, having a huge comeback in the second half and almost beat Oklahoma? I don't see why Oklahoma jumps 4 spots.
Yeah, I don't.
I'm shocked. And they lost to Texas. I'll go back to that over and over again.
Well, and that's why the Notre Dame people are so mad, because they killed Texas.
Yeah.
And their one loss is to Clemson. Oklahoma's
by
one
2
loss
points
is to Texas by
6, I believe.
and that was a bigger margin before the end
Yeah.
of that game. So I don't get it.
I just don't know. I know the committee has certain things they look at, but
Common opponents, you would think, would be a pretty significant, like,
yeah. And
deal that they look at.
And they're talking when it comes to opponents. So if it comes down to that 4-5, if it's Oklahoma and Notre Dame, you're looking at 4-5, and Oklahoma or Notre Dame's on the outside looking in. They should jump ahead of Oklahoma if they beat Stanford, and they're sitting at 5. They should jump ahead of Oklahoma due to the matchup that they had with Texas, and they beat them convincingly. Beat Texas at the beginning of the year.
I know that. I don't know if they will though. The committee's big on conference champions.
Mm-hmm. And neither team will have a conference champion.
Does that? I mean, is that gonna push Notre Dame to join the ACC?
They already play a lot of games with them.
They play. They're in the ACC in every sport but football and hockey. But they play like 4 or more games against ACC teams.
Yeah.
They started that like last year or the year before or something. Does that push them? If the Big 12 gets left out again, does that push them to have a conference championship game?
So let's talk about some of the upcoming schedules, because that might answer some of these questions for what we think could happen in the future coming in the next couple of weeks with rivalry weekend and then championship weekend to follow. So we got Clemson this weekend. They play South Carolina, which should be a big win for them, big margin victory.
Should be.
And then they'll play North Carolina in the ACC championship game.
Which I still think will be a big win, but
So I think Clemson is going to be a clear number 1 at the end of the season. I have no doubt about that. I think Deshaun Watson right now is possibly the front runner for the Heisman. I know a lot of people will disagree and say Henry is, but I highly disagree with you and say that Deshaun Watson and McCaffrey should be 1 and 2.
The only reason that I'm going to say that Henry is the front runner for the Heisman is because he plays at Alabama. He's been the best running back. They're really big on running backs.
Second half of the season, he's been the best running back.
Yeah, correct. For the last few weeks when it's kind of everybody's been watching and, it's getting down to the wire. That's the only reason why I would put him there. I wouldn't necessarily want that, but...
But he's been good. You can't deny it.
You can't take that away from him.
So Alabama's got Auburn this weekend. We all love watching that Alabama-Auburn game. We know what happened last year, 2 years ago, however many years ago.
2 years ago.
Alabama-Auburn. Auburn's has not had a great season, but anything can happen. They're going to to Auburn. Anything can happen in that stadium. Anything can happen with these two teams.
It's the Iron Bowl.
The Iron Bowl is going to be fun to watch. I don't know if I'm going to call an upset on this one, although I'd love to see it. I think Alabama's going to win, but I think it's going to be a close game. A lot closer than a lot of people
That would
think.
be fantastic if they did upset them, but it might be close for a little while, but I think Alabama's going to end up pulling away, but I hope that doesn't happen.
And either way, Alabama's going to play Florida in the SEC Championship, and I think they're going to roll Florida. I would love to see Florida win, but I think Bama wins out, and I think Bama's going to be a clear number 2.
Yeah, I agree.
Florida sucks.
Yeah,
Plain
they're still
simple.
Florida.
And
they're still putting Florida in there for one of the New Year's Six Bowls.
It's going to only have one
I
loss.
think they're
They've
going
had-
to lose to Florida State, and then they're going to lose to Alabama, and they're
Sure.
not going to. They're going to
Sure.
be bummed.
Good stuff. Oklahoma, they have Oklahoma State this weekend in Oklahoma State in Stillwater. That's a huge game for Oklahoma. If they win the Big 12. If they win the Big 12, and they will not get bumped from the top 4. They won't.
I don't think they will either.
There's no chance if you ask me. I really don't think they
God,
will.
that would kind of suck.
So if Oklahoma wins, they're in, and they're going to stay at number 3. In my
I want
opinion.
Oklahoma State to win just to give it another week to see who wins the.
Go Cowboys.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with you, but that's just because I think Oklahoma is a little overrated. They lost their 5th game of the season. We've said it multiple times to Texas. And the committee thinks they're playing the best football out of any team right now, most consistent football. I disagree just after watching them this last weekend. I completely disagree with that, but I'm not the committee.
And I know that their quarterback didn't play the second half, but that being said, how can you say that they're playing their best football? you know. And
Other teams are playing backups and they're playing just as good.
Yeah.
TCU's on a backup.
Baylor's lost their backup quarterback.
Now they're on the third string.
They're on the third string and he threw 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
And that was against an undefeated Oklahoma State team.
Yep. So we'll see what happens in the Big 12. Still a lot up in the air, but only a lot up in the air if Oklahoma State wins this weekend. Iowa, they got Nebraska on Friday. Excuse me. They got Nebraska. Hoping for a big win.
Hoping for a big win, obviously.
And then they got Michigan State. So no matter what, they got 2 more games. If they lose to Nebraska, they're done.
And I've heard a lot of talk, or reading stuff and what have you, that it actually will probably hurt the Big Ten if Nebraska beats Iowa, which it will, because then, Michigan State or most likely, turns around and plays Iowa in the Big Ten championship. Then it's not as significant as a win. Or then if Iowa turns around and wins that game, Big Ten could almost play themselves out of the playoff spot.
I think, here's what I think. If the only other team to me that would hop in the top 4, if Notre Dame loses to Stanford, Iowa loses to Nebraska, Iowa plays Michigan State, and whoever wins that game, if Notre Dame loses to the Pac-12 champion, or to the Pac-12, Stanford, and Stanford wins the Pac-12, I think Stanford hops in that number 4 spot.
That'd be a pretty...
Get a Pac-12 champ in there.
Well,
I would love to see
the only
Stanford
reason I would maybe agree with you on that is because they beat Notre Dame, they're going to jump up a few spots right off the bat. Some of these teams are going to lose. They're going to be right on the border, and if they win the Pac-12 championship game against most likely a ranked
UCLA or
USC, then damn, that could happen.
It could happen because Baylor won't be the Big 12 champ if Oklahoma wins.
That could happen even if Iowa wins out or Michigan State wins out and is sitting maybe at number 3.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that can happen. You got Michigan State has to beat Penn State. Still, if they lose to Penn State, Ohio State jumps in the driver's seat for the Big Ten to play Iowa.
In my opinion, if Stanford were to beat Notre Dame, depending on how that game went, and then turn around and win the Pac-12, I would almost think that they should jump in ahead of Oklahoma.
I would put a 2-loss Pac-12 team in above a 1-loss to Texas Big 12 team, because the Pac-12 we were just talking is probably the toughest conference to play in. Especially this year, you have UCLA, USC, Oregon, Washington State, Stanford,
Utah,
and Utah all in the top. You got 6 teams in the top 25. And those are 6 really good teams. I don't know how you could argue. You need Stanford.
Not to mention Cal had a really good start to the year.
Cal's had a pretty darn good season.
Arizona and Arizona State maybe had a little bit of a down year compared to how they've been last year.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think Utah State's in the Pac-12, but Colorado. And Oregon State.
Yeah, so, but I still think it's the best conference. When you look at 6 teams in the top 25, I think a 2-loss Stanford, if they beat Notre Dame, goes in the top 4.
I think I was looking at conference power rankings, and they had the Big 12, I think, at number 1. But the only reason why I think that is because they have Oklahoma, Baylor, and Oklahoma State all really high.
Yeah.
With TCU. But the Big Ten has actually had a way better year this year than in the past. I like it. I hope that the Big Ten stays with 4 or 5 teams in the rankings at this time of the year. Yeah. SEC sucks.
So then we all know Notre Dame what their schedule is. They got to beat Stanford, and then they have to hope that something else happens ahead of them for them to get in. That's their only shot, is to beat Stanford, and then it's going to be.
Then they're just going to have to wait.
Although
I think there's enough games and teams that have tough games ahead of them that they would possibly slide in.
And we got the championship games that can decide a lot for the playoff too. Baylor plays TCU, and then they play Texas. If Baylor wins both those games and Oklahoma State beats Oklahoma, Baylor's your Big 12 champ, but I don't think they get into the top 4 unless a lot happens ahead of them. They got 6 teams ahead of them.
That's crazy because depending on how some of these games go, even if Oklahoma beats Oklahoma State, they're going to win the Big 12. But Baylor still has 2 more games with teams ahead of them that they could at least slide up and maybe be just on the outside looking in, just like they were last year.
It's going to be crazy. Ohio State's got Michigan, which could be a loss. You never know. But Either way,
I certainly
they're really
think it will be a loss.
they're hoping for hell to happen ahead of them. They're hoping for Michigan State to lose their game. They're hoping for Iowa to lose their game, and then they got Iowa in the Big Ten championship.
Actually, they're probably hoping for Iowa to win their game, but Michigan State to lose their game.
Well, yeah. They need Michigan State to lose.
Then they make it to the Big Ten championship and play an undefeated Iowa. They beat them. They could slide back in. I don't even know why I'm putting that out there because I do not want this to happen.
But it could.
But that's just the scenario.
Yep. And then we are talking about Stanford and what they need, but they're going to play UCLA or USC in the Pac-12 championship no matter what.
They're already locked into that.
They're already locked in, and then the winner of UCLA USC this weekend plays Stanford. So look for this Notre Dame game this weekend. That's a big decider, and that UCLA USC game is huge.
Oh yeah. Well, and something else. I know they're at number 10 and they have 2 losses, but if Michigan beats Ohio State and Michigan State loses, Michigan wins the Big Ten East. Because they only have 1 loss. They lost to Utah.
No,
they have 1 conference loss to Michigan State.
Who does?
Michigan.
Oh, they have 1 conference
They
loss.
have 1
yes.
conference
yes.
loss. They would win the Big Ten East if Michigan State loses to Penn State and they beat Ohio State. If Michigan State loses, well, actually, I think Michigan and Ohio State play first. I think they play at 11 on Saturday.
I think so.
Basically, the winner of that game is going to be
That's crazy.
watching that Michigan State Penn State. I don't know what time that game's at, but that'll be.
So it's going to be a fun weekend.
It will.
Because a lot can
It'll be
happen.
fun.
You never know what's going to happen in rivalry weekend. You never know what's going to happen in championship weekend. A lot still to be decided. Not a fan of that number 3 Oklahoma. I still think they should be at probably 6 with... I would put Notre Dame in there. Like we said, we thought they'd be in at number 3 or 4. And then I think you got Oklahoma, Baylor, Michigan State all on the outside looking in. But I would put even Stanford up there.
Well,
I'd put Stanford above Ohio State.
And as we saw last year, the committee's not afraid to make significant moves the last week.
Yeah.
To where a team that's ranked 6th could jump into number 3, a team that's ranked 3rd can jump to number 6, whatever.
Yeah, and the biggest thing for Notre Dame fans is that them dropping to number 6 hurts them right now.
Yeah.
Because now they have to have 1 or 2 teams, probably 2 teams ahead of them lose for them to get in.
'Cause if
and they have to beat Stanford. Which
If they were sitting 3 or 4 and beat Stanford, they would stay there where they're at, and then the only thing that could happen is if somebody makes a significant move behind them. But now they're going to have to hope somebody loses ahead of them. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult. Sorry,
it's
Ryan.
crazy, man.
Sorry.
Because right now you got 3 teams that can win the Big 12. If Oklahoma State beats Oklahoma and Baylor wins out, Baylor is your champion for the Big 12. But if Oklahoma State wins and Baylor loses one of their 2 games, Oklahoma State's the Big 12 champ. But either way, if Oklahoma State beats Oklahoma, no matter what Baylor does, I think they play themselves out of a playoff right there. So I think there's too many other teams that are more deserving than Baylor to be in that playoff spot due to schedule difficulty. Personally, I think the Pac-12, like I said, Pac-12 Stanford, a 2-loss Stanford over a 1-loss Baylor, absolutely throw them in there. But just my opinion.
Yeah, dude, I don't know.
There's still too many
There
scenarios.
was even a couple other things we were going to talk about, but it's just like, let's just wait and see what happens this week. And,
We gotta wait. It's exciting.
One note that I wanted to make that was, I heard something that was kind of crazy that I thought. They said that at no point in time last year or this year had the committee moved anybody more than 6 spots up or down.
Mm-hmm.
And they did 2 teams this week, and it was Houston lost and they dropped them out,
Yep.
and LSU lost and I think they dropped
Did
them
TCU stay in?
Yeah.
They were 18.
They didn't drop far. They
dropped a 1 or 2
They dropped
spots.
1 spot.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah, that's right.
So
Interesting.
But on the same note, teams moving up 4 spots probably hasn't happened
Yeah.
that much at this point in time. That close into the Final 4.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But we'll see. Lots to happen. You got anything else?
I don't think so. We'll just have a fun weekend and
All right, guys.
happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Turkey Day. Eat all the turkey pie and stuffing you can tomorrow,
We
and
will.
enjoy sitting on the couch doing nothing on Friday. Unzip those pants, undo those buttons, and enjoy yourselves. We're 2 average guys.
Go Big Red.
Hope you enjoy it. Go Big Red.
I was prepared to be ill, though. The skill was sad.